I love cars. Um, Having said that, I love cars, and I love a lot of the history of cars, and I think cars capture something that's very exciting because we can analyze cars the same way we analyze any kind of solution in our lives, any kind of technology, intrinsically, extrinsically, and systemically. And so you might see a car and you might just feel like, I love that. I can't even tell you why I love it. I dig it. You might say, I want this car because people are going to think that I'm cool. They're going to consider me to be more like James Bond if I have that car. You might think that people will think you're being responsible because you have a car that's more environmentally friendly, for example. I think with what we're going to see a huge shift to electric because not just because electric is maybe good for the environment. I think it's more that the total operating cost of the vehicle is lower. So you can make it actually a fairly cheap car that will last a long period of time. And when we do that, we can make them incredibly safe. You can put all the components very, very low, and you can make sure that the crash structures are really, really good. What we're seeing now is the Cybertruck launch is coming up in a couple of years, and I think it's going to be perhaps the most significant shift in cars in, 50 years, maybe more. The idea of putting an exoskeleton on a car, the idea of having a car that is so simply made in a certain way, with folds, that's such a radically different design. It's showing a new direction, both in terms of aesthetics and focusing on maximizing the value you can give to a customer for not very much money, an incredibly powerful car on every axis people care about. That's been incredibly well thought through. Everything's been challenged. And the core of being innovative is to challenge the underlying assumption on every axis. When we're taking a look at the shift in cars, there's only one company now challenging the underlying assumption on every axis. That's why I think something like Cybertruck is going to be huge in terms of its impact. Service economies are going to go through shifts and phases, like Uber, which the exemplars are Uber and Airbnb and stuff like that. But we're going to, I think, have lots of shifts. We're already seeing laws come into place where, the law, certain countries don't like Uber at all, and we're going to see more laws around these people who are now considered to be employees, or they want them to be considered employees so they get some benefits, which is, of course, tough for the actual company to provide them and keep the profits the same and the pricing the same, which makes them desirable in the first place. So we're going to see a lot of shifts on, I think, gig economy workers and working. I think we're going to see shifts in consumer expectations of things like deliveries of physical goods, as we have seen with deliveries of digital goods. And that's going to keep evolving tremendously. I think that the way that media is disseminated and consumed is going to shift. I still don't think we have great analogs for a newspaper. We have information that you can get, but it's not the same way you get a newspaper. It's still amazing to think that a Wall Street Journal is still much better to consume in physical print format than digitally, even on a large iPad. And Twitter is short form, and this short form only leads to greater problems of people with interpretation issues, with the ability, the fact you can't go to the primary source. Short format stuff is, I think, going to go through a shift. People love consuming it, but at some point it's kind of like candy. I think the consuming of information and the fact that people are literally always on and don't know how to turn things off because they're not required to. Even when they're driving, they're not required to. Because of that, I think we're going to have a whole new set of mental health problems, that there's areas to innovate there. And you can innovate on the technology to enable people to turn things off. When the Wii came out, it would at some point say, why don't you get outside and get some fresh air? Which was charming. And people would say, okay, and they'd keep playing. But I think there's some things that will help people in the near future realize how the technologies can help them live a better life, truly live a better life, and knowing the value of switching off. A baby cries when they should go to sleep, when they're tired. They don't connect the fact that if they went to sleep, they'd actually be happier. They don't know that yet. Same is true about people who consume too much media all day long and are flipping through things in bed at night because their brain gets stimulated from this. If they don't realize if they stop doing that, they'd be happier. It's a hard thing to shift. So I think there'll be a ton of changes in terms of how the media are produced in ways to be consumed in better formats. And tons of ways to innovate there.